Good afternoon, boys and girls. Today in class, I assigned you to read the story Inside Out by Francisco Jimenez. The question that I would like you to ask yourself during this story is why does Francisco do what he does at the end of the story? The genre, as we also discussed in class today, is realistic fiction. Realistic fiction deals with characters and actions that seem real but come from the author's imagination. As you read, I would like you to notice how the author makes the setting and characters come to life. I would also like you to pay close attention to the types of items that could be compared and contrasted in this story. Maybe the characters, maybe the setting, or maybe even the emotions that the characters are feeling. But please make sure that you're taking that into consideration while I read. So please read along as I read to you. Francisco has come with his family from Mexico and speaks only Spanish. This is his first year in school in the United States. His parents are migrant workers. While Francisco is at school, they are out in the farm fields picking strawberries. Miss Scalapino is Francisco's teacher, and Roberto is his big brother. Right next to Francisco's desk is a caterpillar in a jar. In time, I learned some of my classmates' names. The one I heard the most and therefore learned first was Curtis. Curtis was the biggest, strongest, and most popular kid in the class. Everyone wanted to be his friend and to play with him. He was always chosen captain when the kids formed teams. Since I was the smallest kid in the class and did not know English, I was chosen last. I preferred to hang around Arthur, one of the boys who knew a little Spanish. During recess, he and I played on the swings and I pretended to be a Mexican movie star, like Jorge Negrete or Pedro Infante, riding a horse and singing the corridos we often heard on the car radio. I sang them to Arthur as we swung back and forth going as high as we could. But when I spoke to Arthur in Spanish and Miss Scalapino heard me, she said no with body and soul. Her head turned left and right 100 times a second, and her index finger moved from side to side as fast as a windshield wiper on a rainy day. English, English, she repeated. Arthur avoided me whenever she was around. Often during recess, I stayed with the caterpillar. Sometimes it was hard to spot him because he blended in with the green leaves and twigs. Every day I brought him leaves from the pepper and cypress trees that grew on the playground. Just in front of the caterpillar, lying on top of the cabinet, was a picture book of caterpillars and butterflies. I went through it page by page, studying all the pictures and running my fingers lightly over the caterpillars and the bright wings of the butterflies and the many patterns on them. I knew caterpillars turned into butterflies because Roberto had told me, but I wanted to know more. I was sure information was in the words written underneath each picture in large black letters. I tried to figure them out by looking at the pictures. I did this so many times that I could close my eyes and see the words, but I could not understand what they meant. My favorite time in school was when we did art, which was every afternoon after the teacher had read to us. Since I did not understand Miss Scalapino when she explained the art lesson, she let me do whatever I wanted. I drew all kinds of animals, but mostly birds and butterflies. I sketched them in pencil and then colored them using every color in my crayon box. Miss Scalapino even tacked one of my drawings up on the board for everyone to see. After a couple of weeks, it disappeared, and I did not know how to ask where it had gone. One cold Thursday morning during recess, I was the only kid on the playground without a jacket. Mr. Sims must have noticed I was shivering because that afternoon after school, he took me to his office and pulled out a green jacket from a large cardboard box that was full of used clothes and toys. He handed it to me and gestured for me to try it on. It smelled like graham crackers. I put it on, but it was too big, so he rolled up the sleeves about 2 inches to make it fit. I took it home and showed it off to my parents. They smiled. I liked it because it was green and it hid my suspenders. The next day, I was on the playground wearing my new jacket and waiting for the first bell to ring when I saw Curtis coming in at me like an angry bull. Aiming his head directly at me and pulling his arms straight back with his hands clenched, he stomped up to me and started yelling. I did not understand him, but I knew it had something to do with the jacket because he began to pull on it, trying to take it off of me. The next thing I knew, he and I were on the ground wrestling. Kids circled us. I could hear them yelling Curtis's name and something else. He pulled on one of the sleeves so hard that it ripped at the shoulder. He pulled on the right pocket and it ripped. Then Miss Scalapino's face appeared above. She pushed Curtis off of me and grabbed me by the back of the collar and picked me up off the ground. It took all the power I had not to cry. On the way to the classroom, Arthur told me that Curtis claimed that the jacket was his, that he had lost it at the beginning of the year. He also said that the teacher told Curtis and me that we were being punished. We had to sit on the bench during recess for the rest of the week. I did not see the jacket again. Curtis got it, but I never saw him wear it. For the rest of the day, I could not even pretend I was paying attention to Mrs. Scalapino. I was so embarrassed. I laid my head on the top of my desk and closed my eyes. I kept thinking about what had happened that morning. I wanted to fall asleep and wake up to find it was only a dream. The teacher called my name, but I did not answer. I heard her walk up to me. I did not know what to expect. She gently shook me by the shoulders. Again, I did not respond. Miss Scalapino must have thought I was asleep because she left me alone, even when it was time for recess and everyone left the room. Once the room was quiet, I slowly opened my eyes. I had them closed for so long that the sunlight coming through the windows blinded me. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand and then looked to my left at the jar. I looked for the caterpillar but could not see it. Thinking it might be hidden, I put my hand in the jar and lightly stirred the leaves. To my surprise, the caterpillar had spun itself into a cocoon and had attached itself to a small twig. It looked like a tiny cotton bulb, just like Roberto had said it would. I gently stroked it with my index finger, picturing it asleep and peaceful. At the end of the school day, Miss Scalapino gave me a note to take home to my parents. Papa and Mama did not know how to read, but they did not have to. As soon as they saw my swollen upper lip and the scratches on my left cheek, they knew what the note had said. When I told them what happened, they were very upset but relieved that I did not disrespect the teacher. For the next several days, going to school and facing Miss Scalapino was harder than ever. However, I slowly began to get over what had happened that Friday. Once I got used to the routine in school, I picked up some English words. I felt more comfortable in class. On Wednesday, May 23rd, a few days before the end of the school year, Miss Scalapino took me by surprise. After we were all sitting down and she had taken roll, she called for everyone's attention. I did not understand what she said, but I heard her say my name as she held up a blue ribbon. She then picked up my drawing of the butterfly that had disappeared weeks before and held it up for everyone to see. She walked up to me and handed me the drawing in the silk blue ribbon that had the number 1 printed on it in gold. I knew then I had received my first prize for my drawing. I was so proud I felt like bursting out of my skin. My classmates, including Curtis, stretched their necks to see the ribbon. That afternoon, during our free period, I went over to check on the caterpillar. I turned the jar around trying to see the cocoon. It was beginning to crack open. I excitedly cried out, "Look, look!" pointing to it. The whole class, like a swarm of bees, rushed over to the counter. Miss Scalapino took the jar and placed it on top of a desk in the middle of the classroom so everyone could see it. For the next several minutes, we all stood there watching the butterfly emerge from its cocoon in slow motion. At the end of the day, just before the last bell, Miss Scalapino picked up the jar and took the class outside to the playground. She placed the jar on the ground, and we all circled around her. I had a hard time seeing over the other kids, so Miss Scalapino called me over and motioned for me to open the jar. I broke through the circle, knelt on the ground, and unscrewed the top. Like magic, the butterfly flew into the air, fluttering its wings up and down. After school, I waited in line for my bus in front of the playground. I proudly carried the blue ribbon in my right hand and the drawing in the other. Arthur and Curtis came up and stood behind me to wait for their bus. Curtis motioned for me to show him the drawing again. I held it up so he could see it. "He really likes it, Francisco," Arthur said to me in Spanish. "Como se dice es tuyo en inglés?" I asked. "It's yours," answered Arthur. "It's yours," I repeated, handing the drawing to Curtis. Boys and girls, that concludes our story, Inside Out. I hope you enjoyed it. Please come to class tomorrow understanding why Francisco did what he did at the end of the story. You will want to talk about that in class tomorrow. Also, see if you can find an item that you can compare and contrast. You might also want to know that for class. I hope you have a great night, and I will see you all on Thursday.